Hi, I'm Andrew Mayne, and this is the Crew Reviews.
All right, boys, let's raise a glass and welcome Andrew Mayne to the Crew Reviews.
Hey,
welcome up, Andrew.
Look at that.
Welcome.
How are you?
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Really thrilled to have you.
Yeah.
You are an illusionist and inventor, which we've never had either of those things on the show. But you are also a best-selling author. I believe 19 books unless my math is off. And your latest novel is Black Coral, featuring a great protagonist, Sloane McPherson. Can you give our audience a quick overview of the story?
Black Coral features Sloane, as you mentioned. She's a police diver, or she started off in the first book, and this is the second book along her journey becoming an investigator. And these books are standalone, so if this sounds interesting, you could jump into this book and not worry. You could go back and read the other one. You'll be fully in context of what's going on. She lives in South Florida, and South Florida is filled with waterways and canals, and we've got ocean and everything there. And her cases tend to involve things that start off in the water or end up in the water. And being a diver from a family of treasure hunters, she's very experienced and understands how to do recovery and how to look for clues in places that might seem inhospitable, but it's actually one of her strengths. And this book involves a cold case, which was actually loosely based on a real cold case in South Florida.
Florida.
It's a hell of a case to be in the book.
Why do always weird things happen in Florida?
We, of course, talk about you before we come on the show, and we all agree that Sloane is a terrific character, one we'd like to see a lot more of.
Yeah.
But I'm always fascinated about the genesis of the characters and the series. What inspired you to write a female protagonist for this particular series?
When I like to write people, and somebody could be from Michigan, somebody could be, have a different background or whatever. It all depends on what's going to help with the story. In the case of the Sloane McPherson character, I grew up in Florida, and I had a couple friends that were women who were extremely outdoorsy on one side. They could go fishing with anybody, could fillet a fish, they could hunt, do whatever, and then put on a dress and be extremely elegant. And I love that quality of somebody who you can't just define in one way, who has a range. And I wanted to do a character that was kind of like that, where Sloane is extremely smart, extremely brave, perhaps a little bit reckless. And part of the course of this series is we're going to have to deal with her learning how to strengthen what she's good at and learn to sort of to make up for some of her, impulsive nature. And so it just sort of came to me, like I had one or two people I was kind of thinking, some women I knew that I'm like, man, like I could sort of change a little bit of their trajectory in their life and probably have a very interesting character in a book. So sort of stealing from people around me.
Nice.
She does definitely at times she's brash, and like you said, she's frankly reckless with her choices professionally, times personally. But when you first crafted her background and her personality, was that like the first trait you thought of, and then you built the character around it?
I first thought about, like, I have a friend who's a TV producer who got her start working as a camera person, first as like a camera assistant. And then she would work on these reality shows set in the Arctic or set in extreme environments. And if you told her like, hey, there's a bunch of shark experts from the Bahamas that need a camera person to go in there and, shoot these sharks. Sometimes they're a little bit bitey, but you'll be okay.
Little bit bitey.
She's a person that had like a small, like lemon shark, like up to her elbow, and she just patiently waited for them to pull the shark apart. She didn't want them to hurt the shark. She's like, do not hurt the shark. She's got that kind of temperament. And so thinking of her and somebody else, I'm like, I've got a personality. Now I'm going to amp, this person's not reckless though, but I'm like, I'm going to amp that up a bit, because when you've been around, people who dive a lot and people who kind of do a lot of, things underwater, et cetera, you kind of, I've worked with a producer who on one hand is one of the best divers I also know, but he's also a person that keeps a wingsuit in his car. So if he's going between LA and Vegas and he sees a good cliff, he'll pull off, go there and do a wingsuit parachute dive off of it. And so, that's a great person to have your back though, when you're shooting or doing something cool. And so I said, let me kind of, where she kind of comes from a little bit of that element where she's so used to kind of cutting it close, she doesn't think about it. And that's kind of in the second book she has a new partner, Hughes, who's a guy who's a trained, SEAL diver, who's a little bit more like, hey, listen, I've been around a lot of people who are like this, and I can tell you who makes it and who doesn't. And
she almost doesn't several times.
Yes.
No kidding. Hey, most authors we know have a word or two that they like the readers to describe their books. And reading Black Coral, despite some of the dark subject matter, one word kept popping into my mind was fun, which I find somewhat different than, say, entertaining, because you can reach that goal in a number of ways. So Black Coral was a lot of fun. And I'm wondering, is that what you were aiming for, or is that just something that I picked up on my own?
No, I think that's fair. When I sit down to write a book, one of the things I do is I do a mission statement, and I try to figure out what is this book going to be about? Because as you know, as a writer, often a book can take off of a life of its own, which you want. But if you're trying to be within a certain, I write thriller mystery, not quite cozy, but my characters, you read my Theo Cray series, like dark stuff happens, but I like my characters and I don't want to shock the reader by having them get killed 2/3 in and the rest of the book's about, the serial killer going on a talk show or something. Although that's an idea.
Although I might read that.
Wait.
Yeah. Not saying it's a bad one, but I kind of part of my audience is like, I have a new book coming out where I had my editor like, you've got to take some scenes out of here, because we will get complaints. And I'm like, and I'm a person like, okay, if I was just writing this on my own and my own sort of thing, I'd be like, I'm going to do whatever I want. Right. But within my audience, and the expectation is, people kind of read this as escapism. So I feel like I'm kind of more writing, Indiana Jones than, something that's going to be, some dark tortured sort of book that could be
Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think even that, I would say that I love the Silence of the Lamb. I love the original. And then I think Thomas Harris didn't know what to do with Hannibal. And that was,
right.
You read him and he becomes like this awesome, like he knows everything.
Yeah. And he tries to sort of redeem him, which we never needed him redeemed. And
right.
So I think that I used early on, I'd used Silence as sort of a model in some ways for temperament of books. And then later on, the Sloane are kind of a little bit more cheeky, kind of, because she's just that personality. Mm-hmm. But dark stuff happens. Like if you read Black Coral's dark things going on, but her temperament is sort of, she's dealt with life and death before. So
yeah.
Well, it's a tough balance to do the sort of put her in real peril, where as a reader, your palms are sweating a little bit, but yet, like Mike said, this book was a hell. I read 100 books this year. These guys read close to that as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
This was one of the most fun reads that I've encountered this year.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah, for sure.
Super quick. And but he's right. He's like, there's some dark stuff, but it's also like, give me to the next chapter, dude. Like, where are we going with this? How's this going down?
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Well, there are a lot of memorable scenes in the book, from the setup, Big Bill, and the incredibly satisfying climax.
Yeah.
But there was another scene that stood out to me, and I believe my co-host agreed, because again, we kind of covered this when we were speaking, and that was the pool scene at Run's house with the family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are all kinds of stakes in this story, but for me, that drove home the stake for Sloane emotionally and gave insights into her character that even some of her actions couldn't. What, to your mind, is the key to writing a scene that doesn't necessarily advance the plot, but deepens the character?
So I think that when I think about structure, there is the structure of the conflict at the beginning and the conflict at the end, but there's also important is what's the character's conflict. And that's very much to me, and kind of trying to resolve that. And in a series of books, the characters' conflicts shouldn't all be nicely summed up at the end of the book. You want them to maybe make progress or go backwards, because of a good reason. And I try to balance that because you've got to be reminded of the person. And so if it's just Sloane always in investigator mode, it's harder because one of the conflicts to her solving the problem is navigating her personal life. And I need to have scenes to sort of remind her who she is as a mother, what she's dealing with this in her relationships there, because I like the idea of looking at imbalance as a conflict. I mean, that's kind of a basic sort of conflict. So scenes like that are sort of just established, like while she's worried about this, she's also mindful of the fact that she's not paying attention to this over here or worried about that.
Well, one of the things that you did really well that I think a lot of times that character becomes this tortured character that has such a dark side that, they're battling with the light and the dark. And there was a little bit of that, but for me, it was more about, it felt more authentic because these are real problems we're all parents. We're all, the three of us are all parents, and to balance our, certain aspects of our life with that family life is a real balance. And it's not a book hero balance, it's a human balance. And I think that was one of the things that was rare about this book, is it wasn't the cliched dark past of, she had issues, but they weren't, she wasn't shooting heroin in the closet.
Book five.
But she's also fallible. There was a scene, and this doesn't give away a spoiler, where she explains to her 12-year-old daughter about like the crime scene. And I've been in law enforcement for 20 years, and I have an 11-year-old son, and I'm like, oh my gosh, don't do that. What are you doing? And I was like, and then Rush was just like, you can't do that shit. I'm like, what are you doing to our kid?
Yeah, I grew up as a son. My father's a federal agent, and so as I got older, I could get more detail. I loved that. Right. I mean, it wasn't anything that you used to sometimes do background checks and talk to serial killers and stuff. I'm like, I loved that stuff.
Cool.
I remember I found like he worked for ATF, and I once found a like slide carousel of like all these. I didn't know what he did at this point. I'm just young kid. I found a slide carousel of all these slides of them like blowing stuff up to see like the radio, how far out debris went and stuff. And then I'm looking at photos of like, like actual like bombings and stuff like this. I'm like, what do you do? why do you have these things? And then he's like, I'm like, oh, cool.
Then he brings you out to the range and blows shit up with you.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yes. That was actually, and the fun part was in his last few years at ATF before he retired, he was the head firearms instructor. And so he had this station wagon. We used to joke, he drove around this big station wagon with this big vault in the back, and he'd have like MP5s and all sorts of stuff. And so like, I once had a buddy who's like, oh, want to go shoot? And I told my dad, hey, my friend Rocket and his dad want to go shoot. He's like, okay, tell him we'll meet him at the range. We show up with, automatics, semi-automatics and stuff.
Yeah, like, how do you have those guns? You need like tax stamps and all that shit for that. No, we're good.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah. Like he would show me how to work det cord, all that kind of stuff. So,
dude, that is some cool stuff.
Coolest dad ever.
He is
not
an
a
awesome
bad daddy.
person.
All right, back. So you wrote Black Coral in first person point of view, and everything unfolds for the reader through the eyes of Sloane. It works well. It works very well. But as you were writing the story, did you ever feel the desire to write a chapter or two from the serial killer sleazy Steve? I mean, can we say that? It's not a spoiler so much. Do you ever feel like you wanted to give like his point of view, maybe a chapter or two?
Yeah, I did. The challenge is when you do the pro and con to first person point of view is that a lot of writers struggle with, and I often advise like aspiring writers, like I don't know what to do. I'm like, choose a character, tell it from their point of view, because then the choices are made for easy for you. You're not worried about trying to sound like a fancy writer or whatever. You know how to sound like a person. I like it. I started this with, I did a character, Jessica Blackwood, who was a FBI agent from a family of stage magicians. And I did it from there because I'd read Susan Collins' Hunger Games and loved that first person present tense. I just love that. It felt immediate. And it felt a way for me to get you in the head of a character who might on the outside feel a little bit unrelatable. Right. And then I did that again with my Theo Cray series. I have a computational biologist who from the outside would seem like Spock or something, but by putting you in his head, he's extremely relatable. even when he's being unrelatable to people around him. For Sloane, I weighed the idea, like, do I want to use this again or not? But then I thought, like, I like a lot of the part of it comes down to kind of the humor. Is it the things that she can say to herself? It's funnier that way than her trying to, make jokes or cut things up, because she's snarky and's got a sense of humor. And also being able to pull, without having to do separate chapters and flash back to stuff, is in the middle of a chapter, she can recall some event or something like that, and it feel natural. The limitations you point out is, like, when we have an antagonist, is I can't all of a sudden jump into that character. But, the thing I learned was actually, reading the Harry Potter series. The Harry Potter series is told entirely, except for the first 30 pages of Philosopher's Stone, it's told from in the presence of Harry. Every storyline, everything, even the stuff with Voldemort, Harry's connected it through some sort of magical device or whatever. I thought, like, no, you could probably do that. And also, I think it makes it more scary.
It does, yeah.
So I think the trade-off is actually a benefit, is if all of a sudden I'm like, you're, Sleazy Steve's just sitting there watching, growing pains reruns, whatever. It's like,
because you don't know when he's going to show up.
He's a psycho.
You don't know he's going to show up, and there's certain instances where as the reader, you're like, is that the guy? And then is that the guy or the woman? Is that the person? Is that the person? And like, and then when it comes and you find out, oh, that is, and then it's a cool climax.
Yeah, when these books are like 100,000 words. If I was writing a more voluminous book of like 300,000 words or something like that, then I would probably feel compelled to go into different points of view. And I have a book coming out November, which is my Theo Craig character and my Jessica Blackwood character, and so the two of them teaming up, and it's told first person point of view from each one. And so I'll do kind of each act, or a run of chapters will be from one to one and switch into the other, to sort of play with that. But yeah, you have to sort of say, like, okay, I can't do this, but what is the strength? And like you pointed out, is the not knowing, and all you know is what the character knows,
right?
But also you can know a little bit more. Like, I put stuff in there, like, even though it's first person point of view, there's stuff that happens around that she's not aware of. And like, I did that a lot with like my Theo Craig books. Like, you read that first one, like, you could probably solve the crime by paying attention to what he doesn't know what to pay attention to yet. and Sloane she's self-aware, but if you're reading is like, she's not talking about this, or she doesn't know about this. This might be a problem for her.
Well, let's look at your whole career for a second. You've published a number of different titles, from An Illusionist FBI Agent, Building a Fortune on Mars,
cool.
Other space-based thrillers. How often is your current work in process interrupted by a thought, an idea that pops in your head? You're like, oh, wait, that would be a really cool one. Like, how often do you have to find yourself and catch yourself doing that while you're trying to finish out something?
I keep notebooks, like same as you, I just keep track of stuff, and you have an idea, and maybe it fits what you're working on, or it might be something that fits later on. I would say the danger is, like, though, when I wrote my first Sloane McPherson book, I'm like, I got back into diving, and I wrote this book because I wanted to do this. As getting back into diving, it reminded me of a thing that I never got to do, which was, I was very interested in great white sharks. And a long time ago, I thought about doing a stunt to try to fool great white sharks. And so in doing
fool them. Did you say
try to fool
great whites?
Okay. Try to fool great white sharks. So I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I wrote that, and then doing more research on diving, and I went and, got recertified. I got, certified for, my advanced certifications and stuff, and started to, to do rebreather stuff. And then one thing leads to another. And I told somebody, like, I had this idea about how to fool great white sharks. I'm literally on the phone with Discovery Channel, the Shark Week, the guy who runs Shark Week, a week later. And they're like, oh, can you do this? I'm like, yeah, I think I could. And then I find myself in the middle of a Shark Week special surrounded by great white sharks. So careful about the ideas you have as you go along, because, well, this will make great research.
Yeah. I don't think there was a cage involved in that one, was there?
No, you couldn't use cages. They'd in Australia, they're worried. There was a concern. Some people thought, like, oh, if you put people like tourists and stuff in cages and stuff, sharks may become, great whites might become familiar with whatever. That was a concern that I had decades ago, but I don't think that's the case. But I'm not not an expert on that, but they had banned cages because of the danger factor.
What?
Which,
Dude.
I'm having trouble with that logic.
Well, no, the logic was that if you had if you are doing dive tourism and putting divers inside of cages and stuff and feeding great whites, and the great whites might lose their fear of humans, whatever, and come near them. Great whites aren't afraid of people. Let me make that very clear. They are cautious and curious. I was down there, and I can tell you very much they had no trouble coming up and saying, "What are you?" And
so what was your Andrew? What was your heart rate during that? Like, guesstimate. What was your heart rate around that time?
I mean, in the TV special or in reality?
Reality.
In reality is calm. You just, by the time I am not a panicker in most situations. I'm sure we'll find a situation where I will. Spyro will be on my shoulder, shrieking. But when you go through drive training, one of the things they do is you go down. You got 60 feet down there, and you do advanced training. They take off all your gear, and you have no air, and you've got to put everything back on. And you quickly find out if you're a person that starts to go, "Oh my God, I can't do it." If you're like, "Okay, I'm going to feel like I'm, suffocating before I am. So let me just keep doing this." With the great whites, the advantage I had is I knew they were there. If you're in water, guess what? If you've been in the ocean, you've been around sharks. The scary part is when you don't know they're there. If you're like, "Yeah, no, there are a bunch of great whites there. They're going to be around you. Here's a shield. If they come near you, bounce them away. That's what you do." And you're working with people who know. I had one person down there with me, Andy Casagrande, who's an amazing, shark expert in cinematographer, just really good at shooting this stuff, and he knows. He's done like in 100 great white dives. So they're telling me like, "All right, idiot, this is what you need to know. By the way, you're an idiot for doing this." But anyway, you're kind of like, it's like, "Oh, well, I know the most likely way my life ends right now." So, but the funny part was like, we go in, we're on the submersible that gets lowered off the back of the boat, and we had the rough waters. And we're in the thing, and I'm getting ready. I'm all prepared. I'm hunched down, ready to go. And the thing goes, all of a sudden we hit a wave, and it just plunges down like this. And I just see a great white, like 8 feet away, just staring at me like, "Wow, okay, what's going on?" Then wave, we're out of the water.
Out of the water.
And I'm like, I see land. And boom, we're back in the water. And he's like, "Okay, what is this?" We start to lower down. And I'm kind of like, I get tapped on the arm, and Andy points to my foot, and my foot's sticking out the side of the submersible. He's like,
No.
"Don't do that." I'm like, "Okay." Then we go a little bit further down, and I hear this weird sound, and he taps me, and he points up, and I look, and there's a great white chewing on a float attached to the rope.
Dude, take me back to the boat.
Yeah. Finally, we go through this up and down, and it's like this tilt-a-whirl sort of ride. Finally, we get to the bottom. He opens up the side, and there are great whites around there because this is an island where there's a seal feeding ground on one side, sealed colony on one side, where the great whites will come eat, and then they'll swim laps, burning up their calories. And we're on this other side. And there's breakers over here will rip your boat apart, and signs all over this island like, "Don't go ashore, deadly snakes." It's the most Australian thing ever. So we get to the bottom. He opens up the side. We've got the comms. He's like, "All right, do you want to get out?"
What? No.
Well, the answer is no.
Yeah.
But since we're here, I guess I have to. And then the thing about great whites was they can see when you're looking at them. They can tell. And the way when you're down there, you have to keep watching them because they're ambush hunters. So they will sneak up behind you. So you're always head on a swivel, always looking around to see you. And you got to keep count of them. And the problem is if you all of a sudden like 1, 2, 3, wait, are we missing one? You turn around.
You're dead.
Because he's coming at you to go, "Are you going to do anything?" And then if you pull up your shield and they're like, "I'm just kidding." It was amazing and surreal though. It was really, I don't want to say, I wasn't, it'd be stupid for me to say, I wasn't scared. Cause like, it's the worst place and the worst thing to be doing, but it was amazing.
Getting back to the books, in addition to avid readers, a lot of our audience is authors, both published and unpublished. You made a successful jump from indie author to a publishing deal. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey and the highs and lows, and maybe any key lessons you might have learned along the way?
Yeah, we live in an incredible time, and I don't think publishers realize it as many publishers realize it. And I think a lot of authors are still sort of stuck 40 years ago. And you can have a great career as an indie author, and I would arguably say in some cases better than your average published author. And if you're motivated and you're driven, because when I'm lucky, I work with a fantastic publisher. My publisher is Thomas and Mercer, which is part of Amazon Publishing, which just it's been a great fit for me. Yeah. And I've worked with other publishers that have been great in their own ways. But I started off as writing my book, self-publishing, and I got it. It was a little over, was almost 10 years ago when I started, and I'd never written a novel, and I decided I wanted to become a novelist. And so what I did was I said, okay, number one, because I'd read an article in the New York Times about how Kindle books and ebooks were selling, and I love the idea of not having a gatekeeper. I love the idea of not having to have some publisher decide to publish me or not, because, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it feels true, is that, Harry Potter got rejected 42 times.
Right. I know. Now look at it. It's a theme park.
Yeah, exactly. It's the most successful literary franchise of all time, probably, like by now, the most successful children's franchise of all time. 42 people said, nah. Now, they probably had reasons. Some publishers like, it's not the fit for us, whatever. Yeah. I would have tried to make it fit, but it's just because people didn't like, it's kind of like Roald Dahl. It's a little Terry Pratchett. I don't know. And it was an outlier. And then now it's become the norm. But that told me that part of the problem the publishing industry has is there's way more good content than they have opportunities to publish. Editors have to make choices between books. They're not going, I just can't find any books. They're like, no, there are a lot of books. I do work in artificial intelligence, and a lot of people are like, oh, we want to use it to write novels. I'm like, there are over 2 million novels get published a year. There's not a shortage of novels right now. So I figured out what I wanted to do was I was going to self-publish, and I really just wanted to get readers. Now, 10 years ago, the way you had to do that was like, you'd maybe try to give your book away for free or do it for 99 cents to get people to get into it. Now with Kindle Unlimited, where people can pay us, 1 monthly fee and read whatever you want. It's a lot easier for discovery. It's great for indie authors now because you get into that program and people don't feel like they're taking a risk to read you. Yeah. So I was very lucky. I think within a year, I had a book that was with the version of Angel Killer before a publisher picked that up. I was one of the top 10 selling indie authors on Amazon because I just watched a book. I'd written several books, and all of a sudden this one just clicked, and then it sold a bit, and then it went down a bit, and I was pushing some other book, and then the algorithms and audience choice, it just went insane. And if I had continued that on as I went with a publisher on that series because I wanted to learn about the publishing industry, and I wanted to learn more about that side. And the idea like, oh, I'll let them handle everything for me, which is a myth. They will do a lot of things for you, but you still got to show up and do a lot of work, and sometimes more work.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes things that like, oh, we want you to sometimes ask you stuff that like, I'm like, I don't do this because I can show you that won't work. And I've learned to be more, involved in saying yes, no. But anyhow,
like coming on the crew reviews. Like coming on the crew review.
Yeah,
sometimes you don't have a choice. They're like,
you don't.
You just have to take one for the team, man.
Yeah. No, it's easy. Sometimes you get like, oh, could you write an article for such and such, and I'm like, I like to write, but like you're like, it's like, some obscure blog nobody ever heard of, and it's like, I don't know if that's the best use of my time, but it might be. I could be dumb, I don't know. But anyhow, but there's I love this sort of stuff. This is great because it's more easier to talk to people and more authentic. But anyhow, what happened is had I continued that on my own, that may have been a very successful indie self-published franchise by myself, but very possible. I've had other books, the self-published books, that continue to make money to this day. I can, I would say that, my mortgage is probably paid still by my self-published books, and a lot of other stuff is paid by this sort of stuff. So I think that people who look down on self-publishing, I'm like, get over it. the thing that matters is being a writer and having readers, and they're just mechanisms in between. And I think there are great publishers and can be great fits, but then if you don't need a publisher, you don't need this. And I know people who are doing really successful things with audiobooks, producing their own and doing their own, because they know more about that market than most publishers do. Many publishers like, we'll just, farm it out, let ACX, decide how it works or whatever. And I would just say that worry about just building your audience, build your audience, get people who, when they see your name, they want to read the next thing you do. Just get books in people's hands.
It's pretty
and don't wait
simple.
for permission. Don't wait for permission,
Well, going back to Black Coral, the pacing and tempo of it really couldn't have been any better. And I wonder if when you sat down to write, whether you already knew like the major set pieces of the story, or did you just throw caution to the wind and be like, this is my character, this is what I'm going to write. I guess what I'm asking is the ever popular question: Are you a pantser or are you an outliner? Or some combination of both?
I am an extreme outliner. I used to be a pantser, and then I looked at. And I used to, in high school, I'd be the kid like, I do my best work the night before. No, you do your best work when you're focused, and usually it's the night before you're focused. I will not. If pantsing works for people, that's great. I would say that, speaking from my own experience, it takes me less than 10 days to write a novel, and these novels have been in Edgar nominees and Thriller Award finalists, whatever.
Wait. What did you say?
It takes me less than 10 days to write a novel. I can get the thing done in 10 days. Wow. And usually I'd say my optimum is probably 10 days to 3 weeks, depending on how much stuff is going on in my life. But I've written some of my best-selling books were written like in a week, and because of my outline. It wasn't like I just said, today I'm going to go write a bestseller. No, it doesn't. I wish it worked like that. But my outline, and it's because of my outlining. When we go through my edit phases, we don't cut anything out. Maybe I might have one wordy or two paragraphs there, but it might be like, okay, let me add a little more detail here or whatever. But we're not, because I'm very, very focused on, when I sit down to write, I know what my conflict is. I know what my resolution is. Now, often I throw out the last 30% of the novel, because by the time I get to there, I have a smarter, better way to end the story. But I have an ending goal in there, and I let the characters sort of live their stuff out. Every chapter, I sit down, I have note cards, every chapter, how it starts, where it ends. And the fun for the writing for me, the pantsing, it's like, how do I make this thing work? What's the most interesting way to tell this? So I am really, really, I'm a believer in outlining. I used to be like, but there is a lot of fun in seat of the pantsing. There is a lot of fun. Sometimes I was in magic for a number of years, and you'd have people that just they love to buy new magic tricks, love to play with this. Then the magicians would be like, oh, well, that's not magic, or that's not this, or you're just doing card moves. But they love that. For some people, sitting down and letting a story just flow and finding it there, that's fine. And that's a totally fine thing. As a commercial writer who's like, I got deadlines and I want other things I want to do, and I got a delivery, I have my method. But
So if it's 100,000 words at 10, a book roughly. I mean, if you were guesstimating here at 10 days, you're writing
10,000 words a day.
Thank you. 10,000 words.
Do you want to know my record for a day?
Please tell
I'm not
us.
sure.
You can do this too. I did 50,000 words in one day.
Yeah, I don't.
There's not enough drugs on the planet.
I did NaNoWriMo in one day. Use Dictation.
Really?
Yep.
You were able to keep your thoughts together and that inspired. That's awesome.
That was an experiment. It was a crappy book. Let me be very clear. I used to struggle, and again, let me be very, very clear. Well, this jerk said I used to struggle in front of a page. I used to have a paragraph. My first writing was just all idea, and I could not develop things out. I was not some 15-year-old kid, loquacious kid writing novels. I got into writing books 10 years ago. Before that, I could never get past 30,000 words.
Right.
I could never get past that. I had to change the way I thought about things and understand what the show part of telling is, show versus tell, all that, and embrace that. Once I did that, it changed profoundly for me. And that was a thing that I think a lot of times structure helps. If you sit there, think about Photoshop. If you open up Photoshop to do something, you're going to fail. Photoshop is a collage tool. You need to have elements and things to work with, to put together, whatever. And if you sit down in front of a blank page, like, well, now I'm going to tell a story. If you're clever or creative, maybe you'll get a little bit far, but you're going to stumble unless you thought about that map. And one of my favorite things, there's this improv group in LA that every Friday night, back when people gathered together.
Yeah, imagine that.
Wait, they do that?
Yeah, they would improvise an entire musical, 1 hour musical. People would throw out a topic, Ferris wheels, zebras, and they would improvise an entire musical in one night because they understood musical beats, they understood dance, they understood, Broadway sort of shows, they understand those structures of those things. And as writers, if we understand those structures and we know, I need to get from here to here, this is how I'm going to make this happen, and then I'm going to have fun making these choices, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah.
50,000, but still, I mean, saying all that sounds great, but 50,000 words is a chore.
Not advisable. It's no way to live. I'm at my most comfort, probably doing, 8 to 12,000 a day. That's my happy writing pace.
God. All right, folks, everybody, redirect your hate mail to Andrew's website.
Yeah, direct the hate mail.
I'm here I'm preaching to everybody, like, you too can do this. Like, I mean, everybody here writes at least probably 1,000 to 2,000 words per hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think
then I delete like 70% of it.
See, that's it. Is you delete it because think about the outline as the minimum viable product. Think of the outline as the DNA. And if you can write an outline, and if you can go through your outline, and I go these note cards, I go, then this happens, and this happens because of this, and this happens if that happens there. And you can outline a book in a day too. Like, if you think about it. And that's, again, this is how Andrew writes an Andrew book. And I'm not telling you like, oh, you're gonna write The Great Gatsby doing this, whatever. No. But every chapter, there's a conflict, there's a resolution. What is my character moving forward? What are they trying to do? What are the other people in the scene trying to do? When I think about it from that point of view, I start with this is how it starts, this is how it ends. Well, then what happens in the middle? And then I start filling that out. Next thing you know, I've got 40 note cards and story.
It's a book. So there you go.
What dictation software do you use?
I normally don't use it, but for funzy and when I'm desperate, like otter.ai is really good. If you're on Google Live Transcribe's good because it does punctuation.
Oh, there you go.
Which is like that's the dream. Like, I just want to dictate my books. Then they get some dictation software and they start dictating like, oh, I got to go punctuate this mother. That's the thing.
Well, if I can get 50,000 words done in a day, I can suffer through the punctuation.
Yeah. Well, I don't like you could again, like, part of it is
all right. Well, so Andrew,
away.
How many days did it take to write this? If you say 10, dude, I'm going to close my camera.
11. He's going to pound.
All right, say 10. Go ahead.
Here's the weird thing. I don't remember when I wrote that. I don't remember when I wrote that book.
Dude, that's cool.
Because I was middle of doing that book. I probably was the middle of production for my Shark Week special.
Right.
So
going on.
It would have been like, I look at my calendar, I could probably tell you there was like a 2-week period here, 3-week period here where I worked on that while doing the other stuff. Like, I just think that I think that
I need to
really clever
drink.
people, really creative people, we get in our way. We get in our own way. Is we get self-doubt. We have an idea. We know how we want to do a chapter. Then a better idea comes along. And then it's like, trust your instincts. Like I wrote this book, Angel Killer, which was sold a ton as an indie. Then it got picked up by a publisher. And then they wanted me to do a second book, which was sort of my real. So I'd written some other novels, kind of my real sophomore novel. Sophomore novels tend to suck from authors because you have 10 years to work on your first novel. Then you got 18 months or whatever to deliver the next one. And magic's supposed to happen. I'm like, I did not want that to happen. I wanted to make sure it was good, really good. So I did my outline. I did my whole mission statement, what I want to have happen. I was stuck to it. I mean, I didn't do mission statements at that point, but I had an outline and I knew what I wanted to have happen, where I wanted to do the twists, all this sort of stuff. Finished it and I had doubt because it just felt too easy. It just felt like, no, like this feels too predictable, too easy. I sat down and I rewrote it, not like from a different, like I changed some things, like a totally different book, some of the same plot points, but a totally different book because I had so much insecurity about the first version. I gave them both to my agent and she's like, you're an idiot. The first one's perfect. The first one's perfect. Okay?
You're giving me 2 books?
Okay. I know, she was thrilled. And then that book was my first Thriller Award nomination. Right. Wow. And I realized, like, I don't know at the end of it if it's good or not. And I said, I have to have a process. So that's, I came up with the idea of the mission statement of like, I need to have this many twists. This is where my character starts. This is where my character ends, which is separate from the outline. It's just saying there's this checklist. If I follow this checklist, this should be a good book. And using that going forward, I got rid of the doubt. I still get to the end of a book. Like I got, Black Coral, I got to the end of it because it came together fast. And I felt like, but I mean, like when writing it, I felt like, is this good? Because I felt like I didn't feel like I bled enough,
I hate you.
No, I don't think you bled enough either.
Yeah. But again, I think the more creative you are, the more complicated you make your life.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I've said that you haven't thought of or got like, yeah, I've thought about at some point.
Well, I don't know. I'm reevaluating my entire life right now.
Guy swims with sharks, doesn't shit his pants. Like, I don't know.
Well, I don't know. He didn't.
We don't know that. We don't know that.
Oh, wait. Okay. All right.
Well, you frequently write on the subject of open artificial intelligence, and you kind of briefly mentioned that. And I think in one of your blogs, you mentioned that you had a passage in a book that you used the open AI to actually write the passage. So my question is did that actually happen? And where did this fascination come from?
I'd always been interested in artificial intelligence and, as a kid and robots and stuff. And then when I started writing the Theo Cray books, who was a computational biologist who used machine learning and artificial intelligence to help solve crimes, and not in a too heady way, but in a very realistic way, just getting in a little bit of the theory and things like, Bayesian statistics and stuff that I say this was like, but then it's like people go, what? And then, I mean, you guys get, but other people, I try to break it down in ways that humans like us can understand. So that was an interest of mine. And then around the same time, I started doing the shark stuff, the Shark Week special, because of my interest in Sloan, and then getting involved in the way like sharks saw things. That was fascinating because shark vision researchers would tell me that, like, if you're in a cage, the shark doesn't see you, they see the outline of the cage, which is a lot like how some image algorithms work. And this was a very interesting thing for me. And I kind of did a bigger dive into ML and AI and started talking about it. And then one thing led to another was when OpenAI, which was the company that Elon Musk helped start to investigate, look into, making safe artificial intelligence, they came up with this new model called GPT-3, and they were looking for people to play around and test it. I got asked to do that and had a lot of fun because it was neat coming from a person with a writing background, exploring something that worked in words. And one thing led to another there. And next thing you know, they asked me to work for them. And so I've been having fun developing applications using it.
Wait, hold on. Didn't you make something for the Quest 2?
Yeah, I've made like for VR. So when I was trying to figure out like how to interact with sharks, people told me the behavior of like great whites, how they wait for you not to look and then they'll go in and try to bump you. So I was able to come up with kind of a very simple algorithm that was sort of like behaved like that. So I made a VR experience where you put on the headset and you're surrounded by great white sharks, and then you got to keep your eye on them. And if you don't, they will come in and try to bump you, which was, I made a night mode where you just have a flashlight and it's a simple game.
It is a scare, man.
Terrifies. It is scarier than the actual being with real great whites. And I would use this on interviews because reporters would be like, what's it like? Well, I can show you, put this on. And you can be going,
Five Nights at Freddy's jump scare.
That's what it is. It's a crazy jump scare.
Wow.
Sorry.
Well, we talked a little bit about your underwater stealth suit. You alluded to the fact that you had this idea, and they said, "Hey, let's go do a show." What was the spark of inspiration behind the stealth suit itself, and what was your testing process, or was it let's see if he eats me or doesn't eat me?
On the last question, unfortunately, closer to that than I was comfortable with.
I had a feeling.
in magic, there's different kinds of ways of trying to do deception. There's the, do you think a hand is empty just because you see it like that when it's not? Are there different ways of which we make assumptions? How do animals make assumptions? How do we, vision isn't just what you see, it's what you infer. Like I have a magic effect that I created where you have an empty shopping bag and you shake it and a feather falls out, and you shake it again and then a bowling ball falls out. And you never see the inside of the bag, but you could tell by the way it's handled and how light it is that clearly it's empty. I wondered to know how much did that apply to other animals, because the magic works because we have these efficient algorithms for trying to understand how the world works, and magic tries to exploit that, particularly like visual magic, but other kinds too. Is we make assumptions and we're not even aware we're making assumptions. We just take them as truths. With animals, you think about this. The great white shark we talk about how incredible their senses are. They have sight. They can see night better than we can. They have an incredible sense of smell. They have this ability to send electrical impulses. Their abilities, way more information going into them, but their brains are relatively unsophisticated compared to, let's say, a primate. But sharks have been around for about 300 million years, and there may have been some involvement in the brains that we can't tell, but it seems to be they've probably figured out optimum ways to do that. And part of it is figuring out what information is important and what's not. What do I throw out? What do I use? And so the way you fool a great white shark may not look the same way you try to fool a person, but it would have the same effect. So I thought, looking at the way sharks sense their environment, I'm like, I think that they're more contrasts, like luminance contrasts are probably more important to them than color. Like very striping things. If you look at creatures that try to camouflage them, even sharks, they have the white belly and then the darker surface on top. And that's so when you're looking up, less likely to notice it, looking down, more likely to blend, and looking at other sea creatures like that. So I tried to create some different suits that would help me change my luminance. In some cases, actually literally match patterns in back of me. And I mean, the version 1 of this was a very technical, overly complicated thing. And then version 2 just focused purely on the luminance factor and minimizing my sound, because sharks are incredibly sensitive when it comes to sound. And if you could limit the amount of sound you gave off. And so I used a rebreather, which if you ever dive with a rebreather, it's a closed loop system. So instead of an air tank with a valve going, your air gets pumped through basically limestone or lime, and it basically takes out the CO2, and you do a little mix. So it's extremely quiet. You can sneak up on fish in this thing, which I've done, and it's cool. You go up, slap them on the tail like an oarfish, and they're like, what are you, a ninja? And then literal conversation I had with an oarfish. But anyhow, taking all this together, I thought, okay, it'd be cool to go around great white sharks and see what would happen. So in order to establish the suit worked, we had to do a baseline test, which meant like, what happens with no special suit, just regular dive gear. And so the first part of the test is I go down there, I step outside of the submersible, and I'm just me in dive gear and scuba tanks and a shield. And guess what?
You had to use the shield.
Saw me. Yeah, sharks were curious, like, what are you? And come up and bump into me. And I had to, they weren't like, I'm going to eat. If they wanted to, I wouldn't be here. But they were like, what are you? I'm going to test your defenses there. And then like, you're a little lively one. Okay. And then Joe, your turn, Oh, yeah, okay. With the suit. Again. So then we're like, so that was baseline. I didn't get eaten. Okay. So then it's like we go up.
Horrible baseline.
I was a horrible bit. It was science. So then for the second round, we put on the suit, you take the suit, and then we're going to go down there and we're going to power it up, and basically just matches my light. So I match the color and light around me. We go down there. I go outside the submersible. I'm in this suit that looks like badass body armor, but it's plastic and polyethylene and foam for the sound and stuff. I mean, it's just, it'd be like a Snickers bar wrapper. It wouldn't stop anything. So I step out there, and the sharks are like, there's this guy. We haven't turned it on yet. Then we turn this thing on, and they just start going away.
Can't see. Oh.
I don't know that they couldn't see me. My thinking is they saw, I think I may have been like a black hole or something weird. And they're like, nah, I don't like this situation. Like,
looks moldy. Yeah, we're not touching it.
We're going to go to the other side of the street. This weirdo, like he knows something we don't know. So
it's good enough though, right?
yeah, it worked. It was a very interesting, very interesting situation. And now there's other, that's an area of research we're trying to figure out, like now
cool.
using kind of active camouflage stuff for underwater, because
Cool.
the end goal is not for recreational divers to sort of hide from sharks. The end goal is basically, could you build underwater ROVs? Could you build methods to observe sharks to help conserve and protect them? Can you build methods that don't interfere with them, that don't freak them out, that let them behave their normal way, so we understand more about them? Because we don't know a lot about great whites as far as breeding habits, things like this, and they are incredible creatures, very vital to our ocean ecosystem. And if we want to be, good stewards of our planet and our oceans, then understanding them and understanding how not to interfere with them would be helpful.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, we did not tell you that this show is actually a 2-part show. It's you have completed the normal part of the interview, the
normal.
This was normal.
So we'll toast you for that.
Toast.
Right.
Congrats on the first part.
I accept your toast. It's all gin. All gin.
Right.
Well, now we have something called the lightning round, and as we like to say, we put very little thought in these questions, so you don't need to put that much thought in your answers. The other thing we always say is that, our mothers say, think before you speak. Well, this is that time in life where you don't necessarily have to.
Nope, don't.
So who knows what absurdity awaits, but I will, since I'm the host, I will start. You have a podcast called Weird Things about paranormal, supernatural, and the like. What is the weirdest thing you covered?
So I started this show because I worked for a number of years for James Randi had $1 million challenge for anybody who could prove psychic powers, whatever. And as of yet unclaimed, because probably there aren't any, who knows, but a lot of anecdotal stories, but I love the idea. We're fascinated by this. And I wanted to have conversations with people about these things. So because I don't think people should feel stupid to say, hey, I had a ghost experience or I had this, because often the skeptic response is, well, you're an idiot. It's not helpful. And as a skeptic, I have many dumb ideas myself. So the weirdest thing was we would do searches for stories, and we kept coming up with these goblin stories in Africa. And you would hear about, like, in some township, such and such, a goblin was caught, or a goblin did this, whatever. And we're like, ha, this is so funny. And it never really made much of the zeitgeist over here of people talking about the goblin stories. And then I read more into them. You started reading the stories, and you realized that it was a mistranslation, that they were using the word goblin to basically mean like possession, and possession to basically mean anytime somebody did something really bad, they would blame it on a goblin. And you would find, like, oh, somebody was accused of, like, seducing somebody else's wife and making her live with, like, goblin, somebody did something even worse, and like, oh, goblins. And it was like, oh, like, this is not really goblins. There's some really bad stuff.
That's every day in the United States.
Just don't give my kid that excuse.
And then you'd find that, like, it was really sad because there was, like, a goblin broke into a girls' school and may have raped like several of the stuff like this. And you're like, translation,
kill the goblin.
Some dude did this and they blamed this. And it's also like, go back to us. Like, let's let's turn the mirror back on us and look at, like, how many times do we attribute things to just words and stuff that we just throw out there without really knowing. So
humanity.
Well, this is somewhat related.
Creepy and weird.
Yeah.
This is somewhat related. You've done a lot to teach critical thinking and debunking and encouraging skepticism towards paranormal claims. Have you ever experienced something yourself besides this show that you couldn't fully explain?
Well, I mean, I can't really fully explain anything. So I would say everything. Again, the debunker is not a word that I think is really a scientific sort of word. A debunker sort of sets out to prove that something is false. And you can just sort of say, does the evidence support a thing or not? And when it comes to that, like supporting the claim that something is supernatural or working contrary to what we think we understand about the laws of physics or whatever, I can't say that I have. I can't say that I've had stuff. I've had experiences and stuff that were like, oh, that's weird. I don't quite know what's going on here, but nothing that I would say is paranormal that I would be aware of. And, I'm open to it though. I mean, I got into it because I loved that stuff as a kid.
Yeah, sure.
We all do, I think.
All right, my third question. You get 3 from each of us. Cruises are maligned by some. I happen to have loved the couple of experiences I had on a cruise ship. That said, a lot goes on at sea. What is the sketchiest thing you witnessed on a cruise ship?
Other than my own performance, I haven't performed on a cruise ship in like 25 years. So my knowledge of like what that side of it is. The sketchiest thing was, I mean, back in the 90s and the 80s, like the people that taught me about the industry I got into, you had early on, like the cruise director was an incredibly powerful, coveted role because the cruise director would get kickbacks. And it's changed now. But it used to be the cruise director would get kickbacks because they would tell everybody where to go on shop on the, oh, go to such and such jewelry store. They're great. And so when that ship comes to an island, that ship is a main source of economy and a driver for that. And that's one of the things that people don't realize is like how dependent those islands are on the cruise ships and coming in there and the money that would go back and forth to there. So I would say that was one of the interesting sides of like, there are people like, you know, the millionaire cruise directors was a fascinating.
Well, I'm going to use host discretion, Chris, before you go. I have one more. It's not really a question.
Yeah, whatever.
So you have a bunch of fans and they're called Maniacs, Andrew Mayne Maniacs, which is freaking awesome. And I was thinking about it. Houts, I don't know what your group is called. You were a musician. Did you have a name for him?
Yeah.
We'll keep that down low. There's no play on, but I'm thinking about, my last name's Cameron, so I'm thinking about Camasaur instead of
Camasaurs. I'm still working. That doesn't work. No,
sounds like it really doesn't.
Well, if you
got a siren outside, there's your answer.
Maniacs is pretty good. All right, so
I didn't come up with that. That was back. I used to create magic effects and stuff, and I did a kind of magic called shock magic, which was like, you know, like pretend to eat a rat and other fun stuff. And I had, you know, some kid like, I'm a big fan. I'm a maniac. I'm like, well, that's good. I'm using that.
Yeah. Why not use it? Everything they give you. What was the most pervasive thought in your head when you were swimming with those great white sharks without a cage?
How did I become the dumbest man in the world?
So you had a producer in the water. Did you have a cameraman also? Or
no, just a cameraman. Just a cameraman. No, the producer's up. The producer, he has no idea. He's up on the boat. He would be funny because like we have like the people who shoot Shark Week shows are amazing, incredibly talented group of people. And I had, you know, and there were field producers were great. My friend Donald Schultz was incredible. You know, we had just these great people like Guy Foes, this camera guy's done a ton of this stuff. And like, it'd be funny because like we'd be in the back of the boat at night and they'd have all these fish, like in the Bahamas, all these sharks and stuff around there, keeping it very sharky and stuff. And then like the producer would be like, you know, we need some shark footage. Fo, jump in the water. You know, the camera guy jump in there. And it's like, all right, how long should I be here? And he's holding the camera, getting shark stuff. And then all of a sudden we see this thing go boom, straight forward. And like Fo just literally jumps on the back of the boat. I'm done. You know?
Let's move away from the ocean. And let me ask you, what's more dangerous? The predatory animals living in the Everglades or the swamp people who call it home?
I think they're all misunderstood.
That's good.
Alligators. So we do a little bit about alligators and black coral, and I love alligators because, like, I talk about like the number of alligators that we have in Florida is like larger than probably the population of like at some point would have been some states.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
They just want to be left alone, but every now and then you get encounters where, you know, people and you get a big predator that's that large, and there are some tragic stories. There was a place where I used to go jogging, which was this big like levee along ran along one side was a canal, this intercoastal canal, and the other side was the Everglades, and I loved that. And one day I'd been there for weeks. I found out that a woman had been killed because she went there early morning and she like encountered a gator and tripped over it. Now these interactions are extremely rare. They don't happen that often, but sometimes they do. It's tragic, but if you understood the number of alligators out there, it's kind of amazing.
That doesn't happen more often.
Yeah. Lightning is your bigger threat. You know,
You're a magician, you're illusionist. What's the coolest thing you've made vanish?
I gotta do, when I did the pilot for my TV show, Don't Trust Andrew Mayne, which actually was the first episode, I got to do a thing that I loved, which was where I came up with this method to make somebody's card. Instead of doing it on stage, was to make somebody's card disappear. And the idea was sort of a bit of misdirection, whatever. But the way it would work is you'd be in a parking lot talking to somebody next to their car, and then distract them for a moment. They turn around and their car's gone, even though it's boxed in by other cars. Now, when I had this idea and I figured out the way to do this, I had a producer who was a friend of mine who was generally kind of gave me, they had all the confidence in what I would do. But I said, I had this idea, and she's like, nah, I don't think it'll work. And then I'm like, no, it could work. But I couldn't convince them because it's hard. Because sometimes if you want to do people, it's hard where they haven't seen it done before. They don't know if it can be done. And my goal at Magic is to come up with things we will never seen before. We went out to eat somewhere in Orlando, and we're walking out in the parking lot. And I brought this up again. I'm saying it would be really cool. I'd love to be able to do this. And we go up to her car, and I'm like, it'd be cool because imagine your car's here. And I take a photo, and I said, we turn around, and on my phone, I show your car, and I shake it, and then the car vanishes off of the phone. Like, that would be really cool if we could do that. She's like, yeah, it'd be really cool, but I don't think it's going to work. I'm like, okay, good luck getting home. And I walk away, and she turns around, and her car's effing gone.
Get the fuck out of here. That's awesome. You're such a dick, but that's awesome.
She tells the story. She goes, that's what I was. And that was great because she became my biggest advocate later on when I try to convince people about stuff, to be like, let me tell you about the time this, because I try to tell people like, we could make this work. I'm like, I don't know. And then I had to go do it, but it was a
God, I wish I knew how to do that stuff, because I would do that to my boss's car. It'd be fun.
Have that brain.
Nice.
That is awesome.
All right, I'm last. Number 1, Elon Musk calls you and offers you a spot on the first expedition to Mars. You're allowed to take one personal item. What do you choose?
One, you're assuming that I would accept the first mission to Mars.
It's a one-way trip.
You were in a freaking shark-infested ocean. You're going
totally
to
going.
Yeah. But I mean, that's for sure. The thing about Mars, it's not so much, going to Mars is cool. It's the time commitment. Like literally Inspiration 4. Okay. Inspiration 4 is the current, they bought a bunch of seats on a mission, a Crew Dragon launch, maybe at the end of this year.
Right.
And you're going to spend 5 days. And I was thinking like, what would I do for 5 days in a capsule with a bunch of other people, let alone, I'm kind of pee shy, and
you got to poop. What are you going to do for it?
And I don't know if you've seen it. It's actually the toilet's on the ceiling. If you've looked at this Crew Dragon.
You can poop on a ceiling.
Wait, 5 days to get there?
5 days around the moon.
5 days around the moon. To get to Mars is several months, and then you got to 9
months.
You could write like 27 best-selling novels.
I was just gonna say, so
man stuck on spacecraft. Let me tell you how stinky everybody else is.
9 months. 9 months would allow you to write 2,700,000 words at your 10,000 words pace.
So the answer of the question, let's say, but again, if it did come up, I probably would say. So here's the thing: who would I bring? My girlfriend. Were she not available? Let me tell you who I bring.
Charlize is looking for somebody, I think.
I would bring. I'd bring probably one of the people I work with on Shark Week, one of those super resourceful dudes, because those are people that you want to have on your back, because these are people like we had a problem with my suit and we had to totally rebuild things in the middle of nowhere with no materials, and the people there just helped me build this. These guys, they get it. We've had a guy that his background is working on boats and stuff. Then one day he gets asked, go on he's a fishing guide, and the next day he gets asked if he ever thought about shooting video. And he's one of these great Shark Week videographers, and these other people there who are just super capable, super don't care, they'll get it done. They'll just get it done. So that'd be one of my friends I work with.
All right, cool. All right, number 2, Sweeps Week is in full panic mode, and they need something big. So you decided to bring the 3 of us on a great white shark dive for A&E's Shark Week. Sean, Chris, and I are placed in rubber suits shaped like seals and tossed overboard. Here is my question.
No.
Is what's in Chris's gastrointestinal tract an attractant or a deterrent against an attack?
I'm Italian, so go figure.
Good question. So I worked with my trainer before my Shark Week special, and he had me he put on my diet like a lot of tuna and fish oil, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to be eating this much fish oil. I don't know that I really want to have this coming out of my pores. Maybe I'm wrong.
It looked good though.
I ate tuna fish for lunch.
Yeah.
I would eat Australian sea snake because great whites don't like venom. So that would be my diet for the week before.
I suck at swimming too, you fuckers.
All right, here's the last question, folks. You finally cracked the code for an AI system that creates world-class literature, thriller fiction, and movie scripts.
Ooh.
My question is, how many years go by and how many best-selling books and movies do you create before actually revealing your discovery?
All right.
Ever.
Mike, there is a problem in that premise, and that is assuming that publishers or producers would realize this was world-class and great content.
That's for sure.
That is
earlier discussion.
So yeah, the issue there is, like I said, like over 2 million books are published a year. Discovery is our problem. Discovery is our problem. But let's say that I was able to leverage this and keep doing this. When would I tell people that
How
this
far
is how I
along
was
this
doing
process are you going to actually let people know?
It's Will.
I'm not telling.
Yeah.
Grave
3 generations
I will
later.
drink to that.
Cheers, brother.
Yeah. Only when it's once somebody else says, I'm first and I did this, I'm like, no, I am. I was a fraud before you.
I just know you'd say, no, I just figured it out last week. That 19 bestsellers, those had
that was my own stuff, man.
Andrew, this honestly, this was one of the more enjoyable reads I've read this year. I love this character. I want to hear more from Sloan McPherson. So freaking you better write.
This was a lot of fun, man. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I have a book due. I have the next one's due at the end of this month.
Dude, you're son of a bitch. Swimming through an alligator nest tunnel. I don't want to give away spoilers, but I was like,
yeah, now we have to edit that out.
I know, edit that out, but cool shit.
Yeah, because that ruins the book.
I know.
Yeah, it does.
Ruins the book.
James Bond
Please,
had a
Steve.
gadget. Oh, he had a gadget.
Oh, sorry about that.
Damn it.
No, but seriously, Raise a Glass Boys. This was a great interview. Andrew, we could talk to you for days, I'm sure.
Yeah, man.
But we're really excited about this book. We're going to push the heck out of it. Just thank you for coming on. And
Thank you, guys.
It was a blast.
Boys, that was a fantastic freaking hour plus. Maine, whose book? Black Coral, he wrote in 10 minutes. But this book is fantastic. This interview was fantastic.
It was.
The Crew Reviews every Monday brings you fantastic guests and fantastic interviews. And this bourbon is fantastic. So I'm going to raise it as a toast to the great show. We'll see
Here it is, boys. This is life. All right, this is the outro for Andrew Maynne. And Sean looks like he just got in from chopping a cord of wood. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
Hey, I'm Andrew. You should be watching the Cruise Review. Sorry, Crew Review. Sorry.
That's all right.
It's the last card off the tongue.
I thought when Rip was like, hey, I do 3,000 words, I'm like, Jesus, I hate you. And now this dude's like 10,000 words.
He's like, I
Wait till he
wrote
gets the
that
A.
book. I wrote that book in 3 weeks. Like
He's going to get that A. He hasn't started the book that's due the end of the month.
3 weeks.
And he's going to write an AI program that does it all for him. I was kidding, sort of, but you watch.
He's like, I need to decompress.
Chris, no jazz hands. Mike has to leave.
I'll take body parts, though.
Well, take Jake.
That was my best outro ever.
You suck. By the way, that ruins the show. It ruins the show.